My name is Eric. I'm 31 years old, as well as a single dad living in a one-story house with my son, named Alex. It all started the night before Christmas, when Alex was 5 years old. Alex was so excited, so we decided to go for a walk around our town. We were walking down our road listening to the sound of carolers in the distance. That led us all the way down to the main street. When we came face to face with the three old women singing, I took out my phone trying to record a story for my Instagram, just like other people around us. When I looked down, I saw my son covering his ears. I stopped recording, crouched down, and asked him what was wrong, but he didn't answer. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the middle woman of the three carolers was giving my son an evil grin with a large, creepy smile. She seemed a little bit weird. Well, it was a chilly December night, so I decided we would head back anyway. When we reached home, my son looked relieved. So I thought he just wanted to go watch TV and catch up on his episode he thought that he might miss. Later, as I was cooking in the kitchen, I took a glance at my son, and I could see that he looked absolutely terrified. He was sitting straight up on the couch, which faced the TV. There was a large window next to the couch that had the curtains slightly open. Then he sprinted up quickly, ran to me, and just hugged my leg. "Daddy, she's here," he told me with a shivering voice, and I replied, "Who?" He exclaimed back, "The middle woman we saw when we watched the caroling." I quickly looked at the window, and there really was that old lady we saw not too long ago. I closed my eyes for about 1 second, and when I opened my eyes again, she completely vanished. Being freaked out, I called 911 naturally, telling them about what had just happened. There were 3 cops that showed up, so I explained the incident to them again, and one of the cops showed me a photograph that looked kind of old to me. She was in there. Then she pointed to that old lady, asking if this was her, and I answered yes. She started laughing. My son looked confused until I asked why she was laughing. She stopped and gave us a kind of serious look this time, but was still smiling. Then she said, "Hey, you know what? I know this is weird, but this woman died 3 years ago, on this exact same day." My heart dropped. That's when my son looked terrified too. I tried to calm him down, but I couldn't believe what was going on. The other 2 cops came inside and said they found no trace of anything while searching. It made no sense. When the cops had left our house, I put my son into his bed and went to my room. I turned the light on my nightstand that was close to the side, grabbed my phone, and decided to check Instagram, thinking that if I could find anything, I would just call the cops back. I opened my story, and to my surprise, I couldn't find that old lady in there. I checked another story, and then checked another again. But in fact, it was just 2 women there singing. Feeling mixed emotions like scared, mad, and even more, stupid, I started checking some other people's stories from around my neighborhood. And still, she wasn't there. But all of a sudden, I realized something. When I was checking some story feeds, I ran into one story of some woman who was standing right next to me during the caroling. Where my son and I should have been standing was replaced by nothing. It was like we weren't even there from the beginning. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. I put a hand over my mouth and couldn't say anything. That night, that Christmas day became the most terrible moment for us. Well, I'm 33 now, and my son is now 7 years old. But even if everybody thinks that it doesn't sound true at all, we both still remember it like it was yesterday.
What I'm about to tell you was the most terrifying experience that I have ever lived through. It's something that I will never forget. It happened years ago around Christmas. I have a wife and one son. They're the most important people in my life. I would do anything for them. That's what terrified me about that day the most. The thought that something might happen to one of them. My wife used to be friends with this woman named Janet. I got along with her husband okay, but we weren't really close. We only ever saw each other when our wives hung out. Janet and her husband had a son as well, so it was a nice situation. The two kids could play together while the adults talked, and we never had to get a babysitter. One year, Janet invited our family over for Christmas dinner. Unfortunately, her husband had to work late that night and couldn't attend, so it would just be me, my wife, Janet, and our two sons. I was surprised that Janet would invite us over on a night that her husband worked, but we of course accepted the invitation, so we headed over to Janet's house for dinner that night. It all went well at first. The food was delicious and we had pleasant conversations. Janet seemed slightly on edge, but I assumed that it was just the stress of the holiday getting to her. I knew I felt burnt out from all the preparations. Then something strange happened. I heard creaking noises coming from upstairs as we ate. I thought it was odd, since no one else was supposed to be home. I asked Janet about it, but she just said something about the house being old.
Oh, it creaks like that all the time. Don't worry about it.
It happened several more times during the meal. At one point, I could have sworn that I heard footsteps coming from upstairs, but I just ignored it based on what Janet had said. It had to just be the old house. Eventually, we finished dinner and headed to the living room. The kids went upstairs to play, while my wife Janet and I conversed and had some wine. Another hour went by without any event, and I realized that it was getting to be pretty late. I was just about to ask my wife if she was ready to leave, when suddenly, the scariest thing happened. I heard screaming coming from upstairs. My wife and I immediately started panicking, but Janet remained strangely calm. Then I realized it was our son. I immediately ran upstairs to see what was wrong, but when I got up there, all the lights were turned off for some reason. It was incredibly dark. The screaming had stopped, and I had no idea where it had come from. It was difficult to make out anything in the darkness. "Son, where are you?" He didn't answer. I really started to panic then. I ran through the dark hallway, checking different rooms. I couldn't find my son anywhere. Then I saw some light peeking out from under a closed door. I frantically opened the door and barged into the room. And I couldn't believe what I saw. My son was lying on the floor with a large man dressed as Santa hovering over him. My son looked scared to death. The man was dressed up like Santa with the wig, beard, hat, and boots, but he was in underwear. It was terrifying. What the hell is going on? The man didn't say anything. He just stared at me from behind the fake beard and wig. Then he made a move like he was going to attack me. I quickly pushed him out of the way and grabbed my son. He started crying as I escorted him downstairs in a total panic. I told my wife to get our stuff together and then started cussing at Janet. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She seemed confused about what was happening. I asked her why she would lie about her husband being at work. I knew she had to be in on the whole thing. Janet just stared at me and my wife gauntly and didn't say anything. As a matter of fact, she had this disturbing grin on her face. My family and I were horrified. We got out of that house and drove home as fast as we could. My son was still in shock and crying. I still couldn't believe what happened either. We knew that family. My wife had been friends with Janet for ages. It didn't make any sense. My family found it incredibly disturbing that Janet would pretend that her husband was at work, while he was actually hiding upstairs the whole time. It explained everything though. That was why Janet seemed strange the whole time. The creaking noises that I heard were obviously him moving around. The most horrifying thing was what her husband intended to do to our son. And why was he dressed as Santa? On the ride home, my wife got a text from Janet that said,
"Is everything okay?"
We were totally disgusted. The family had to be completely insane. Why was she still playing innocent? My wife texted back and told Janet that her and her husband were sick and needed help. Janet left it on read, and that was the last time they ever spoke. Janet hasn't responded since. My wife completely cut her off as a friend, of course. We still couldn't understand how they got along so well for such a long time. We tried to report them to the police, but they said that it was just their word against ours. There was nothing they could do. My son was in shock for a long time, but he eventually got over it mostly. I, for one, am still scared. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't made it to that room in time. I just know that there's something extremely wrong with that family and that they need help. This is downright one of the most disturbing stories. It was a fan-submitted story regarding a viewer who claims he and his family experienced when invited to his mother's friend's Christmas dinner during the year 2016. Allegedly, the viewer's family opted out of not to file any charges against the dad or family. The viewer remains traumatized about the ordeal and shares his horrific incident every Christmas.
This happened when I was on my way to my grandmother's house. On that day, I tried to catch the jeepney because the other buses were already full at 12 a.m. I finally found a jeepney, and there were only a few people inside. There was a driver, a money collector who was hanging onto the outside of the vehicle, 2 girls, a few guys, and an old woman. We were on the road when we passed by a mental hospital. Then a lady with a hospital gown on was standing there, pointing her finger out, which meant she wanted a ride. She was bald and her face was pale white. The jeepney stopped next to her, and the inside of the car went silent. The streets were covered in fog and darkness, and the light of the jeepney was the only light source. At the time, I was texting my grandma and said that I was going to be late while glancing at the lady. However, before she stepped on the stairs of the jeepney, the driver abruptly jammed the accelerator and left her behind. I was confused. It seemed like everyone was too. When we looked over at the driver, he seemed to be so scared, but we didn't know the reason why. I asked him why he left the lady behind, and he replied with a trembling voice. He said, "She's not just a lady, ma'am." At that point, the driver looked at the rearview mirror, shut his mouth, and then increased the speed. When I followed his eyes towards the mirror, I saw it. The lady was running towards the jeepney with a weird pose and an abnormal speed. She was so fast that I couldn't see her face clearly, but her dress was visible. It was covered with blood. The collector, who was hanging outside, jumped inside and then yelled to the driver, "Faster! She's getting closer!" People inside of the jeepney were getting scared. I was the closest to the door, and out of nowhere saw the lady jump on the vehicle. She then slowly hung onto the door of the jeepney, and finally she lifted her face. She had bruises all over her face, and she was smiling at us with sharp teeth and big, deep black eyes. My heart almost stopped, and everybody in the jeepney screamed. I quickly hit her with my bag, and she tumbled down from the jeepney. However, the moment she got off, I saw her standing. She looked at me and then laughed like a demon. Not long after, the jeepney finally reached the station. Everyone hurried off the car. I got off and handed my payment to the guy. Then I went to the 7-Eleven nearby and bought some snacks to ease my nerves. I was at the counter thinking about what just happened, and then the cashier suddenly asked me, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'll just say that I saw a crazy lady on the road when we were riding on the jeepney," I said, and then I couldn't believe his response. "I know her. She had cancer, and the moment she lost all of her hair, she went crazy. laughing all the time, hurting herself, and even threatening to kill people. That's why her family eventually moved her out to the mental hospital. But after a week, she tried to escape, got hit by a jeepney, and died, he said. I was shocked, and goosebumps were all over my body. I asked the cashier if he still remembered the plate number of the jeepney. Well, for my privacy, I'm not going to mention the number, but after he told me, I thanked him, got my change, and looked for the jeepney I was on. The moment I found the jeepney again, I froze. The jeepney that I rode was the same one that hit and killed the lady.
And God bless Grandma and Grandpa, and God bless Mommy and Daddy, and also God bless Santa so they may find our house and bring us lots of presents. We've been good all year long, God. Well, except that incident at assembly last week, but that was Tommy's idea, God, not mine. So please don't punish me. Thank you. Amen.
Hey, did you say your prayers?
Yes.
Good. Now get some sleep. Remember, Santa knows when you're awake.
How does he know when I'm awake? He's too busy delivering presents all around the world.
Santa doesn't share his secrets. You have your monster killer?
Yes, Mom, I have my monster killer.
Good. All right.
Can you leave the door open? Just a little, please?
Of course. Remember, he knows when you're awake.
Mom?
Oh, hey, relax, buddy. Is everything okay?
Mommy is hurt. On the staircase.
Hey, it's all right, little man. Your mom's in the kitchen cleaning up that mess you guys made, baking those cookies for Santa Claus.
Everything okay? I heard you scream.
He's fine. He just had a little nightmare.
Oh, honey, everything's okay. We're just right downstairs. Go back to bed. Try to get some sleep, okay?
Yeah, you don't want Santa skipping over us because you're not asleep. Come on.
We love you, honey.
Love you too. Mom?
He sees you. knows when you're...
Good morning, Tyler. Merry Christmas. We thought you were going to sleep all day. Your father's ready to open presents. Come on downstairs, sleepyhead.
Whoa.
There he is. Merry Christmas, little man.
You got me at football?
I'm gonna take you to the field, show you throw like your old man.
All right.
Hey, let's wait for your mom, all right? We'll start with these little ones over here.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
He sees you when you're sleeping.
He knows when you're